Welcome to Policing TV. Each week, we will explore the highlights from our latest videos, diving into topics like AI, technology, drugs, and the people shaping the future of policing. We kicked off with Rachel Tuffin, Interim Director of the Centre for Police Productivity at the College of Policing, who was answering the question, what can the college do to strengthen delivery of policing services for any given community?
The question, what do you care about right now? So are you looking for ideas for things to do in your new things to do in your practice or in your police force? If you're looking for ideas, the place I would start is the Practice Bank, which is a resource which has over 250 entries now, and is accessed around over 4,500 times a month already. And basically what includes is across all different aspects of policing, everything from human resources to investigations to public order, ideas that forces in England and Wales at the moment, so there's opportunity for international expansion potentially there, have developed, have implemented in their force and have written up and provided some lessons learned. So you could have a look at that and think about, is that something I might do in my organisation that could help us to improve? So that's maybe a starting point around ideas. Maybe a really basic thing is if you, using Google or a search engine of your choice, enter the topic that you're interested in and then college policing, you'll see that what will come up is likely to be resources from our standards, from our leadership offer, and from our What Works offer too. And you'll be able to navigate from there to specific things that interest you. If you wanted to go direct though, I could tell you that we have leadership, learning and standards that you could look at. So we've created leadership standards for England and Wales specifically, but the process that we did to get to those standards is likely to be of benefit in all sorts of different countries, I think, because we drew together an evidence base, we built on lots of discussions and engagement with forces. And when we've done work on leadership previously, when we did our leadership review and the findings of that fed into this, we looked at international evidence. So I think that leadership learning and development material would be of interest. For officers in England and Wales, they can also access, there's a leadership learning platform that you can log into, and that will provide you with extra resources, development resources that you can use, videos that you can engage with and so forth. So there's extra information for forces and officers in England and Wales. And then around the standards, so we know that our standards are picked up and used internationally. We have people accessing them from all over the world, and we're always very pleased to hear feedback from people who do read them, because it's always really interesting to us to know who's using them and what they're using them for. We don't always get to find out, but they're there as a kind of a public good, if you like, and the process that we go through to build those standards is kind of overtly evidence-based. So we're trying to build in the research evidence into those standards, that they cover all of the key issues in policing. And we try to be quite selective and focus on the things that we think really matter. So not writing down everything, but making sure that we just pick out the things that really matter. So if you're interested in standards, you can add authorised professional practice. If you want to focus specifically on the standards area, that has its own little website where you can go and look at lots of different standards areas in policing. And then finally, in terms of what works, so we have developed something called the Crime Reduction Toolkit. That goes back, I think we started doing it about 10 years ago now. And what the Crime Reduction Toolkit does is it takes all of the research that's been produced on crime reduction, as the name suggests. So all of the evaluation studies where somebody has introduced something new and tested whether it impacts on crime or not, and it summarises them all by sort of topic area or intervention type. So it would be like domestic abuse, specific kinds of domestic abuse initiatives, or hotspots policing, or problem solving. And each entry in the Crime Reduction Toolkit tells you what we know about whether it works or not. So does it reduce crime? How strong is the evidence that tells us that? what kind of mechanism is involved. So what do you actually have to do, and have we got any cost effectiveness evidence? And kind of other information that might be useful. So that crime reduction toolkit, if you're looking to reduce crime and you want to know what do we already know about what works, and we have a strong sense from the evidence, the research evidence, that's the place to go, is directly into the toolkit.
We next heard from Professor Dr. Cheah Phaik from the Faculty of Arts and Social Science, Universiti Tunku Abdul Rahman in Malaysia, on a groundbreaking new tool they were rolling out across Southeast Asia and beyond to prevent job scams, a big area of concern.
In my area of work, I deal with students, and they are going out for internships and applying for full-time jobs after upon graduation. So they face a lot of challenges. So this Verify video is a short research-based educational video that we have developed to assist job seekers, especially young people, to help them recognize and avoid fraudulent job offers. So it was produced, it's a student-led project. It was produced as part of the corporate social responsibility initiative by my students who are taking the Bachelor of Communication majoring in Public Relations program. So this is a course that I teach, and this is a project that is graded. So this video was actually developed by the student, and information that we use came from literature review, popular and credible job sites, as well as news sites, because we found that there are not much data available about job scams. So we also consulted police officers, senior police officers, regional police officers, and also investigating officers who are involved in investigating job scams, and as well as the operations for scams. So that was how this video was produced.
Lastly, we heard from the Tech UK's Justice and Emergency Services JES Procurement Subgroup. Adrian Lear from the JES and MD of Triad and his fellow committee member Alan Fairley discussed the new Procurement Act, which has reviewed and refreshed all areas of the procurement lifecycle.
I'm also part of the Justice and Emergency Services Committee at Tech UK, which is the trade association for the tech industry. I'm part of a group looking at how procurement matters matter within the world of justice and emergency services. So naturally, the launch of the Act was a big deal. Our group's made up of representatives from all sorts of organisations, large and small, and we all felt that the Act was something industry needed to understand to get the most out of the opportunity it presented. Later on, my colleague Alan Fairley dives into more detail around the Act itself, but I just wanted to briefly position our guide to the Act to help people understand whether it's something they should be reading. Now, spoiler alert, if you're providing goods and services to the justice and emergency services sector, or to the public sector generally for that matter, then this is a 5-minute read which is well worth your time. And if you want to access the guide quickly, the QR code behind me will take you to the relevant page. So initially, we aimed our guide at supplier organisations within the justice and blue light sector, and particularly those people involved in commercial activities relating to the provision of capabilities to justice and emergency services clients. We're not just talking about big managers here, or commercial lawyers for that matter, but anyone involved in the end-to-end cycle from early stage concept right through to the delivery of services. And the reason for this is that the new Act takes a far more holistic approach to the acquisition of goods and services, and it puts an emphasis on things like transparency and forward-looking information to maximise engagement with the supply chain. And it also deals with performance and delivery way beyond the initial award of contracts, so it's really addressing the complete commercial life cycle. And yes, our gravitational pull does take us towards suppliers within the justice and emergency services sector, but much of the guide contains good general advice for suppliers engaging with the wider public sector. And we also decided to adopt a style that made the guide interesting to those on the buy side, as well as those on the sell side. We did this partly to create a sense of alignment between buyers and sellers, but also to demonstrate to the buying community that industry takes very seriously its role in uplifting the general quality and value for money of purchases made using the public purse. And on this point, we were really pleased to receive endorsement from Cabinet Office and Crown Commercial, a real validation of the guide and its content. In terms of specific points of interest for justice and emergency services as a sector, a lot will depend on how buyers themselves embrace the Act and the power it offers to challenge the old procurement orthodoxy. For us as a group, we see a couple of key areas of specific note. First is the Act places a duty on buyers to consider SMEs, that's small to medium-sized enterprises. This could help to diversify the supplier landscape and drive more innovation, and that's something that's sorely needed, particularly in areas such as policing. And second, there's something called a competitive flexible procedure. Now, essentially, this allows buyers to create different procurement pathways to suit their particular needs. And where we see great potential for this is through the use of demonstrations and proofs of concept during the procurement process, rather than having to rely solely on a written response. And what we think this will involve is, beyond simply testing the functionality of a given product, these proofs of concept, for example, could also be used to demonstrate interoperability with other systems and platforms. And that would solve one of the perennial problems of acquiring new products that just don't fit well with the existing estate. Anyway, enough from me. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Alan, who will go into a bit more detail. And meanwhile, I hope you find the guide and the Act both positive additions to your work-winning repertoire.
I am Alan Fairley. I'm one of the Vice Chairs of the Justice and Emergency Services Committee at Tech UK, and I also serve on the procurement subgroup within that committee. I've been asked to say a bit about what changes I expect to see in the Justice and Emergency Services market over the next couple of years or so, following the introduction of the new Procurement Act just a few months ago. I think firstly, the Procurement Act is a welcome piece of legislation. It's effectively rebooted the whole approach to public sector procurement, and it really aims to create a more equitable and efficient procurement environment for both suppliers and buyers alike. And there's probably three key areas where I think we'll see major changes. Firstly, and for me one of the strongest aspects, and in my view one of the most advantageous to suppliers, is the emphasis on transparency in the procurement processes. So I think we'll start seeing unprecedented levels of openness from buying organisations, and specifically that might include things like upfront publishing of procurement pipelines, planned procurement notices or pre-tender market engagement, or I would expect to see a lot more sharing of information up front via the new single central digital platform. And all of that can only lead to increased competition and fairer opportunities for suppliers, and that has to mean better outcomes for buyers. Secondly, I think another big theme of the Act is that it aims to simplify procurement procedures. So whereas before we used to have 6 different procurement procedures, there's now only 2. The first of those is called Open, and that's still the single stage procedure with no restriction on who can submit tenders as long as they satisfy stipulated conditions up front. And then the second is now called Competitive Flexible, and that gives buyers the opportunity to construct tailored bespoke procurement pathways where requirements might be complex or specialised, or where there might be a large market. And interestingly, that also allows for dialogue and for negotiation as well, and also things like the introduction of things like proof of concepts as part of the procurement process. Now that's intended to reduce the administrative burden on both suppliers and buyers, and so that should make it easier for suppliers to understand and therefore participate in bidding for contracts, which is good news. And then thirdly, there's definitely a big focus on encouraging the participation of SMEs within procurements. And I think with that, we can only see more SMEs and therefore a more diverse range of suppliers, which should hopefully encourage a lot more innovation and cost effectiveness as well. So that's the three big areas I think we'll see change. There are other important parts to the Act as well. So, for example, there's a big focus on social value, where I think we'll see suppliers being asked to demonstrate how their services contribute to community goals. There'll be more focus on compliance, so suppliers will need to comply with various regulations, including things like sustainability and ethical sourcing standards. And I also think we'll see some changes in the way that contracts are monitored, which should lead to more effective management of supplier performance, which I think is definitely going to impact how services are delivered. So in summary, I think we'll see quite a few areas of change, but overall I think it's going to benefit both buyers and suppliers, which can only be good news for the Justice and Emergency Services market.
Thank you for watching. Tune in next week.